Charles here of Hooked Fly Fly Fishing, and today we're going to tie another jig. This one's going to have rabbit fur for a wing, plus it's going to use rubber legs. And rubber legs are very, very effective fish attractor, and whether it's carp or smallmouth bass, they just love anything with rubber legs. It's patterned on my Headstander fly, which has been a super effective fly for me. And I've got tons of smallmouth on it. But if you watch these two videos that I'll put in the cards, you can see if I use a very large jig, I don't get a lot of hookups with smallmouth, especially in that 1 to 2 pound range. Well, what's happening? They're coming and hitting it from the side to kill it, and then they'll turn around and swallow it. Well, when it's, heavy, got a big heavy jig on it, they hit and go, oh, that's fake, and off they go. If it's small enough, like my Headstander fly, they'll take it in one gulp, and then you hook them up. So that's the reason why this jig is quite small. It's tied on an 1/8 ounce jig, and it's not very big at all. And so a smallmouth can grab this as easily as it can grab my Headstander fly. So we're going to tie this one up today, and we'll show you how to put in rubber legs to give additional movement to the fly. Oh, sorry, the jig. I'll make that mistake all the time. So first off, we'll put our 1/8 ounce jig into the vise. And you'll notice I've taken off the peg because we don't need it. Now the rest of the material, our thread is a dark brown. We're going to be using some gold wire to keep the rabbit strip wing on. We're going to use this black barred rabbit strip in tan. Rabbit's lovely for smallmouth and carp. The body is going to be this kind of ice chenille. It's medium pearl. Great flash to it. And I'm using this tan speckled rubber legs. I really like the speckling on rubber legs because when they move, that speckling adds to the attracting. It kind of looks like the fins of a fish moving. So let's get going, and I'll tie on my thread. Like I've said before, always cover the slippery bits up so your materials can grip. Now we'll tie in our wire. Because we're going to be using it after we tied on the body and tied on the wing, that's the last thing to be wound. It has to be tied on first. So the last item to be wound on is always tied on first. So you go in reverse order. Now I'm going to take my thread back to about the hook point, roughly. I'm going to fold that wire out of the way. Now I'm going to take my chenille, and I'm going to actually tie it behind the wire. And then I'll bring my thread in front. Out of the way. So we're going to wind some chenille behind the wire. Then we're going to fold the wire out of the way and wind some chenille behind it. Sorry, in front of it. Now, bring it up on to the head of the jig. And put a turn in there to keep it out of the way. Okay, at this point we're going to tie on our rubber legs. And you notice I've left myself some space. I didn't go right to the end. Also, you see the wire protrudes from the middle of the body, not the middle, but towards the end, not right at the end. And the reason is, if you put your wire right at the end, when you wrap it around the rabbit, it can push the rabbit down so that when you start to retrieve, it'll start to spin on you, which we definitely don't want. So by leaving a little bit of chenille behind the wire, it means that when we tie on our rabbit, the rabbit's not being pushed down. So I'm going to grab my rubber legs by the halfway point and then put some wraps in there. Be prepared to adjust them. They do move around. So you can see I'm grabbing it by the halfway point, put some wraps in, adjust it. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to get some CA glue here, and I'm just going to put some dubs in here to help hold this all together, because you don't want this coming apart on you while you're fishing. So now we bring our chenille. Make sure you're not bending the legs. Get a few turns in there. Now we're going to come in front of the front legs, a couple of turns in there. There we go. Snug it down, and now we'll just tie off the chenille. Cut it off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the legs back out of the way and really bind that in. Okay, good. Now we're ready to put on our rabbit wing. We need about 2 inches. That's it. 2 inches of leather. And if you put any more on there, it ends up being too long. And as I say, we get back to that problem of the fish doing the stun strike instead of just inhaling it in one go. Don't have to worry about largemouth. It can be that long with largemouth or walleye. But for smallmouth, it's got to be small. So the first thing we do is we measure the amount of leather we need against the length of the hook. And then we push it onto the hook. Now we have to take the jig off the hook, move the rabbit around, and put it back on the vise. Okay. Now pull the rabbit fur tight and put a turn in here. Couple of turns. Make sure it stays on top. Stroke everything back out of the way and bind that down. Now you see you've got a lump sticking up there. Just come in with your scissors and cut that lump off. Oh, there's a bit left. There we go. Now we bind that down well. Okay, now it's time to put in our wire, and be careful when you're doing the wire not to grab one of your legs. So get your bodkin out, pull the leg out of the way, and you come in with your bodkin and you separate the hair. So you can get the wire to go over without trapping any of the hair. Again, get your legs out of the way. Separate the hair out of the way. Move the rubber legs. This part's tedious. Take your time. But it makes sure that your rabbit wing stays in place. And you don't want to trap too much of the fur. Otherwise it looks a little odd. Okay, I'm going to bring this wrap up between the legs. Get it between those rubber legs. Again, take the hair out. And this last wrap will go in front of the legs. And it helps to just put in an extra turn there. Okay, now we're going to wind in our wire. Move everything out of the way. Get a few turns in there. And we come in and clip off our wire. Just be careful not to clip one of our rubber legs when you're doing this. Okay, now we're going to just finish this off. And the last step is to put in some half hitches. Hold everything together. Be careful you don't cut a rubber leg when you're doing this. Very easy to do. Now you notice my rubber legs are quite long. If I left them like this, they'd end up behind the hook into the hook gape, and they end up get pinned there. So what you do is you trim the rear ones no longer than the gape of the hook. And then you can trim the front ones a little longer. There we go. That one's still a little long. We'll trim that a bit more. There we go. So there's our rubber legs in place, our rabbit strip wing. Now we just need some head cement and keep that everything in place. Okay, so there's our jig with our rabbit strip wing, no more than 2 inches long, keeping it small, an 1/8 ounce jig, and we've got rubber legs on it to give it that extra movement, and it resembles my Headstander fly, which I've caught tons and tons and tons of fish on. So you can see the size is the same, and it'll fish just the same way. And just cast this on a light rod, and you're good to go. There we go. Nice and easy. A little bit of a fiddle putting the rabbit wing on and the rubber legs, but once you've done a few, you start getting into a pattern with them. And it's a very, very, very effective pattern. So give it a try. Cheers.